Hey, what's cracking? Here at the local Pick Your Part Junkyard, aka my backyard. We need some parts off this old girl. See that all that fuel injection stuff doesn't quite mesh with the carburetor. Need a different bracket. I may even need to throw a cable off this. But I'm gonna steal some vacuum lines and I'm gonna steal some brackets and some other stuff. Because if you remember correctly, this truck does not run, so we don't need any of that garbage. So, hey, while I start taking the stuff off, why don't you watch an episode of Nibby's Garage? So we got all the fuel injection off, gone. The wiring harness is gone, the fuel injection is gone, the smog pump and all that crap is gone. We welded the whole shut in the manifolds where the smog tubes went. We've got the carbureted intake on that I machined to fit. We've got our quadrajet on that we tore apart and rebuilt. Now, I'm going to use rebuilt as a wide term because I really didn't rebuild it. I just tore it apart to check it out and clean it. The thing was already clean, just like somebody rebuilt it not too long ago. But I tore gaskets when I took it apart, so I had to order a rebuild kit so I can get those gaskets. It's all back together. It's on the truck. The air cleaner's on. Well, kind of on. We've got to make a stud, which is simple. 1/4 inch all thread and a wing nut. Ta-da! You have a carburetor stud. We've got quite a bit to do before we even get this thing to run. You've got to get it in time, drop the distributor in, make sure our plug wires are good, make sure our plugs are good, and then hopefully crank it over and fire it up. Now, we've got a brand new gasket. We've got brand new fuel lines. We've got a new fuel pump. We've got a new fuel line running up to the carburetor, and we've got a freshly serviced carburetor. Should be no trouble at all. Cross your fingers. We had to get brackets off the truck out back, and I'll tell you why. You see, fuel injection versus carbureted. Most of it's close to the same. What's it do? Well, it delivers fuel into the engine. One's computer controlled, one's manually controlled by your foot. The difference is your fuel injection sits a bit back and a little lower in the intake than your carburetor does. So your fuel injection is actually closer to the firewall than your carburetor is. Well, that causes trouble with your brackets. See, the throttle brackets on the style engines, your mid-80s small blocks, all bolted to the back intake bolt. Now, they bolt to the back intake bolt, so there is your fuel injection bracket, and where my finger is would be your back intake bolt. Now, the problem we have is that was fine for the fuel injection. Worked great, lined up perfectly. The carburetor, it does not. My cables are coming up about 1.25 inches shy. So, you take this, and where my finger is, I'm holding the back bolt hole. This is a carbureted cable bracket. Fuel injected, carbureted. See the length difference? Get about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. Now, well, why don't you just make something work? Why don't you just, make a bracket or weld your own stuff up? That's great, that's fine. But the throttle valve cable on a 700 R4 is very, very picky. 4L60s don't have a throttle valve cable. It's all computer controlled. This is an overdrive transmission before they had computer controlled overdrive. So it has to have that throttle valve cable to tell it when to shift into overdrive, to tell it when to downshift. It pretty much tells the transmission what to do and how to do it. It's kind of like the wife of the engine. You didn't hear that from me. So you got to make sure it's adjusted right and it's where it belongs and it runs properly. So I just wanted to get the right bracket. Luckily, the truck got back, same transmission, same engine, same intake, same carb. Ta-da! Just like magic. Tips, tricks, and tools of the trade to kick your project into high gear. Nibby's trick of the day. This has to do with the air adjustment screws on a quadrajet. This little guy, this little booger. Now, what do we do with the air adjustment screws? Let me explain to you why we have to work on them. See, the older carburetors in the 60s and 70s, The air adjustment screws are so easy to get to. Look, right there they are. Oh, they're huge. Look how big they are. Even my dad can see them, and he usually has to wear his spectacles. So they were easy. Now, move forward to the 80s with all the smog emission stuff and all the fuel economy crap. What GM did was they preset the carburetors and they plugged the holes with plugs. Ew. So what did we as mechanics do? Well, take them off, take a screwdriver, knock the plugs out. Now you can get to the screws. But they're still weird little D-shaped things. Ew, what are I supposed to do with that? That's not a screw head. I can't get in there with a screwdriver. You usually have to take needle nose or 22 shell. I heard guys using 22 shells. Smash them a little bit with a pair of pliers, and there you go. Well, here's what I do. Screw them the whole way out. And you have this. This is what you have. A little D-shaped, square-shaped head. I take a Dremel tool with a tiny cutting wheel. Look how thin that cutting wheel is. Oh, it's a nice little cutting wheel. I take that and I notch my screws and put them back in. So you can't swap screws from carburetor to carburetor. Some of them you can. You get, 2 or 3 identical carburetors, you can swap the screws. You can't go use the air screws from a 70s carburetor in one of these newer models. The taper on the screw is different. You won't be able to get your airflow adjusted right, and you will be very, very unhappy. So, go from this to this, and you'll be much happier in your final adjustments on your quadrajet carburetor. And that's Nibby's Tool Tip of the Day. Brought to you by Dell's Performance. You want performance? Go straight to Dell. Now, to get the number 1 cylinder to top dead center, it's real simple. Take the number 1 spark plug out. What's inside the number 1 spark plug hole? Number 1 cylinder. Take your thumb, put it over the hole, and have somebody bump the ignition until the compression pushes air past your thumb. You ready, Randy? Yeah. Just bump it. Again. 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 Wow. And there you have it. It blew my thumb off. Must be pretty close. Now we'll do the rest. So now we've got the number 1 cylinder at top dead center. Our next step is to make sure that we've got the distributor pointing where we want it. And we want it pointing right at the number 1 cylinder, which it is. Ta-da! Right there's number 1 cylinder, and it's pointing right at it. Why do we want to do that? Well, because when we sit the cap on here, the number 1 spark plug wire will be right there. And that's a good place to start, to be very close to where it needs to have its spark for that cylinder. Can you put it somewhere else? Yes. Yes, you can put the number 1 spark plug wire at the back of the cap. You can put it wherever you want as long as you go in sequence 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2 around the cap. But it's just the way GM does it. It's the way mechanics know it's supposed to be. And it's how I do it. So I know when I buy spark plug wires, they're going to fit. When I buy a cap, I can pull them all off, put them right back on. I have bought cars in the past to where they weren't the way they were supposed to be. Number 1 was at the back, or somebody just set a distributor in and put the plug wire wherever it landed. Yes, it will function. Is it right? No. It just makes it hard on you, makes it hard on everybody. What if somebody else works on this truck? What if it breaks down on somewhere and somebody else looks at it? Oh, well, the reason is your plug wires are on wrong. It's just the industry standard. So, next time we see each other, hopefully this thing will be running. I'm going to get everything buttoned up on the top of the engine, all the vacuum lines, and get the distributor wired, get all the plug wires put on. We're going to put new plugs in it because they look horrible. They got like a 1/4 inch gap. I can't even believe it ran. So, until next time, everybody stay aware, stay safe, and do something fun in your own garage. Don't waste it.